Hi everyone, I'm Alexandria. Welcome to my kitchen. This is my first time doing a video blog, but gotta start somewhere. So I have a lot of friends that ask me about making sauerkraut, and people are interested in making their own sauerkraut, which is a great way to save money and get amazing amounts of probiotics every day. I like to eat sauerkraut with almost every meal. Let's see, I have one fermenting right now, and you can see it's got some nice little bubbles in there. Yeah, we'll get back to this in a bit. Okay, I'm going to start. I used some of this cabbage for dinner the other night, so I'm just going to cut off the part that has kind of gotten old and icky. Somebody asked me recently about buying cabbage pre-shaved. You can do that at Trader Joe's and at Whole Foods and maybe other stores. I don't recommend doing that. I think it dries out pretty quickly, so that's going to make it trickier for you to get those juices going. It also decreases the nutrient content. So once you start chopping into your fruits, juicing, whatever you're doing, the nutrient content's going to start dropping. Same concept of picking the fruit or vegetable. You want to eat it really quickly after it's picked. That's the same idea. So you can see I'm taking off the outside layer of cabbage. We're going to use that later when we put it in the jar. So you can see I have a little cabbage head on top of there and leaves pushing it down. So we're going to use that later. I'm going to start cutting it up, and I'm going to end up using this food processor with a slicing blade. You can use a smaller one, like you're grating the sauerkraut. I've done that before. I just don't like it as much. I like a crunchy sort of sauerkraut, so the bigger slices allow you to get that crunch. A smaller slice will ferment faster. The pounding process is faster, but it's not as crunchy. So I don't know. You guys choose. To each their own. Alright, so I have those in pretty good sizes, and I'm gonna power up this food processor and we'll slice away. I like to use a bowl that's pretty sturdy, like this, for the pounding. This is a kind of small batch because I just used one partial head of cabbage. But if it's a bigger batch, I like to use a pasta pot. It's just a lot easier when you're pounding, and that'll be good for 2 to 3 cabbage heads, so probably 2, I don't know, 2 big ones. So that's great. I definitely recommend the pasta pot. But here, so another question I get is about how much salt do you use? So Sally Fallon, in her, this is my much-loved Nourishing Nutritionist Cookbook, says to use 1 medium cabbage and 1 tablespoon sea salt. Honestly, I don't measure my sea salt, but I think that's, she's usually right. So, do what Sally Fallon says when all else fails. So now we pound. I just use a jar to pound. You could use a mortar, pestle, whatever this is called. You can use that, but I don't really like that. I just use a jar. My husband likes to fill it with water, and then it's a little heavier, so he's pretty smart. You could do that too. And then we just pound. So Sally says you can use 4 tablespoons of whey. That's a great idea. Add some extra probiotics, and it gets the juice going a little faster, so you don't have to pound it as much. I used to do that. I don't do it anymore because I like to be able to serve this to friends who are lactose intolerant or just have dairy conditions, dairy allergies. I just like to be able to always host whoever in my home. So I don't do that anymore. But what you can do also is you can add juice from your previous batch of sauerkraut. So I have this one going, but I also have one in the fridge, so I'm going to use that. You can see it's It's almost gone. But we'll just put a little bit of that juice in here. Yeah, it's the same concept as yogurt or sourdough bread, where we keep the culture going, we keep it alive, and it increases our probiotic content. So, how long do you pound for? Again, I go back to Sally Fallon, and she says to pound for 10 minutes to release the juices. I think that's a good idea, but sometimes, you know, your arm gets tired and you don't have the timer set or whatever. So it's important to be able to know when it's ready. So let's take a look at this. It's gotten kind of juicy looking, so that's a good sign, but I still see salt crystals kind of whole in here. And I've found that red cabbage takes a little more pounding than green cabbage. Now sometimes you're having a lot of trouble getting juices flowing, and I think red cabbage tends to do that. So you can see there's really no juices in there. So you need to do some hand massaging. That should help get those juices out. And once you start to see the juice kind of appearing at the bottom of your bowl or pot or whatever, that's a good sign. And you just want enough that you feel like it's nice and juicy before you start to jar. Okay, so I usually do this over the sink, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So I definitely recommend doing this over the sink for you guys. Save some mess. But I'll just use this cutting board as my mess surface. So I still didn't really get the stuff really juicy, but it's pretty liquidy, and you know, I don't have time for this stuff these days, so we do what we can. And we're gonna fill the jar. And like you can see with my existing jar of sauerkraut, we want the vegetables to be covered in liquid. This is true no matter what you're fermenting. When the stuff is exposed to the air, you increase your chances of mold and no good. Yeah, there's really not a lot of juice in this. Hopefully yours is juicier. I think it might have been partly because I had that part of the cabbage chopped off. That really doesn't help. Okay, so here's my stuff. This is when I really like to use the, whatever this is, pounding thing. Because you want to get it kind of down in there. And that gets the last bit of like juiciness extraction. You know, when you're making fermented carrots, this is really all you have to do is put it in the jar and then pound. This really didn't get very juicy, and this jar is pretty large for what I'm trying to do. So you can see I added a little bit of water, filtered water, to cover it up. And then I'm going to push in some bigger cabbage leaves to cover the bottom. So if you have a fancy fermentation crock or something like that, that makes this stuff a lot easier. But for those of us who don't, you just want to make sure that the cabbage is kind of putting some pressure on the fermenting vegetables. The point of all that is just to keep it submerged underwater. So you can see in this one that I've already, it's pretty much done fermenting. It's pretty fizzy. Watch out. Sometimes we've had explosions in our house. So you can see that I kind of put that cabbage chunk in there to put pressure on the leaf. So there's a leaf underneath holding down all the little pieces of cabbage, and then that is pushing on that leaf. That's a great method if you have it up to the top like that. Ideally, you have your cabbage a couple of inches below your jar top, and then you have some liquid, and then about an inch between the liquid and the top of the jar. But this will work too. The thing is just keeping it submerged. So yeah, I've also even put another jar in there. A little bit of like a sauerkraut hack. So this is another clean jar, and I'm putting it in there just to put some weight and some pressure on. And then I'll go ahead and put this cabbage on top of that. So you can see that this is all like trial and error, and there's an art and a science to this for sure. You know, I'm going to use a metal lid. That'll work better. So that piece of cabbage is too big on top, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit. So I'm actually really glad that, you know, this cabbage was too small and that we had some trouble getting the juices going, because I think that's the reality of doing these things. It's not like, you know, your chocolate chip cookie dough recipe that pretty much you just do the same thing and it turns out the same every time. Your sauerkraut's going to be different every time you do it, and it's going to be great every time. Now, things you want to look out for: mold on top. That's a huge one. It will be fuzzy and gray and nasty, and you're going to not want to eat it. So, you know, a lot of times my mom asks me, "Oh my gosh, I don't know, I've had this sauerkraut for a few weeks. Is it okay?" And I say, if it's not okay, you're going to open it up and be like, "Oh, I'm not going to eat this. This is disgusting." So, yeah, how do you know when it's ready? This one's super fizzy, and that's awesome. I love that. Look at that. Beautiful. Those are all bubbles. Whoops. Not foam. I mean, not mold, so that's good. I think I did this about a week ago, so it could be ready. I think I'll finish this today, and then I'll probably start that tomorrow morning with our eggs for breakfast, and then transfer it to the fridge. You can also taste your sauerkraut if you aren't sure if it's ready. It really only takes 3 days, according to Sally Fallon, for it to get that probiotic content going. The longer you go, the more probiotics it's going to have in there. So you might want to let it go longer if that's what you're going for, if you have time. If you're out of sauerkraut and you need some, then dig in. You can pull some out of the bottom and then use that for your meal, and then put the lid back on and let it ferment a little longer. I wouldn't recommend doing that too much, just because you're going to expose it to air and whatever else, and you really want to keep the bacteria good and not bad. Yeah, I think that's about it. So let me know if you have questions. I'm really happy to answer them, and happy cooking. Bye.